Hello and welcome to my Toyota Pro Ace self-build camper van tour. Now, if you're new here, my name is Ian and I'm a landscape photographer based in the UK. And for the past few months, I've been slowly converting this van into a little home on wheels, which I can use for my photography adventures. Now, it has been a bit of a labour of love over this last 4 months or so, but it's finally starting to come together and it feels pretty much finished now. Now, I picked her up second hand. She's about 6 years old and she's got 75,000 miles on the clock. And apart from a few scuffs here and there, overall she's in pretty good condition, knock on wood. So before I show you around, I just wanted to talk a little bit about what I needed from this build, because I think, like with anything, having a clear idea from the start makes a huge difference, doesn't it, going forward? So first and foremost, I wanted something that didn't look too much like a camper van, if you will. I really wanted to keep things as stealthy as possible, something that wouldn't draw, I guess, too much attention when it was parked up somewhere. It also had to be economical to run, compact enough to fit in a regular parking space, and low enough to get under most car park height barriers, since this van is also going to be my daily driver when I'm not on my photography trips. At the same time, it needs to be big enough for family getaways as well. That means space for me, my wife, my daughter, and 2 dogs. So yeah, there were definitely a few compromises along the way, and every inch of space had to count. So let's take a quick look at the outside and the cab before we dive into the interior. And like I mentioned earlier, I wanted to keep this van as stealthy as possible, so I haven't made too many changes to the outside. The main thing I added was privacy glass to the rear doors and one of the sliding doors, just to help add some light into the living space, but also retain some privacy. One of the reasons I chose the Toyota Pro Ace is because it has twin sliding doors, which gave me a lot more flexibility with the layout. It also allowed me to have a dedicated garage or service area on one side, while still keeping access to the main living space on the other. And that's been a really useful part of the design, and I'll show you how that works in just a minute. The only other thing I've added to the exterior is a very discreet awning rail on the roof. It's powder coated to match the van's paintwork, so it blends in nicely. And the awning itself is from a company called Stitches and Steel, who makes some really nice, well-designed van accessories. I think this one's called the Van Awning 1. What I really like about it is that it also works as a barn door canopy, so I can open up the back doors and have a bit of a shelter as well, which is, I guess, great for outdoor cooking or just having some cover when the weather turns a bit dodgy. So no solar panels or roof vents or anything like that. I'm just keeping things really minimal. Like I said, a really stealthy setup. One of the reasons I went with the dark grey paint was to help the windows blend in a bit more, to keep the whole thing a little bit more low key. The cab area is pretty standard too, but it actually transforms into my daughter's bedroom. I'll show you how that works in just a bit. And if you're interested in following along on my weekly landscape photography adventures, where I'll be out and about exploring in this van, feel free to subscribe. It'd be great to have you along for the ride. Now, before we get onto the cabinetry and the layout inside, I did a fair bit of work which is actually covered up. So let's get onto that first. So since I don't have any solar panels fitted, I wanted to make the van as efficient as possible, especially when it comes to keeping it warm in winter and cool in the summer. Less heat loss means I don't have to run the heater as much, and in the warmer months the fridge doesn't have to work as hard either. So I invested quite a bit of time and money into insulating everything, with the aim of reducing the power consumption overall. I used a few different products from Dodo Mat. First, I added a layer of sound deadening to help with the road noise, and then a couple of self-adhesive thermal insulation layers went on top of that. And after that, I filled the gaps and the voids with an eco-friendly fleece insulation. Everything was then ply-lined and finished off with a 4-way stretch carpet, which gives the interior a tidy, clean look. The floor's insulated as well, again using Dodo Mat with a ply subfloor and a really tough non-slip vinyl over the top of that. And that's mostly to stop the dogs from sliding around when we're on the move. Now, the biggest challenge with this build was figuring out a layout that worked not just for me and my photography uses, but also for my family trips as well. And that meant a fair bit of research and planning. Since it'll be 3 of us plus 2 dogs, we wanted to maximise the living space while still keeping enough floor room for the dogs to relax on as well. In the end, we went with a U-shape configuration because, you know, I think it gives plenty of space to sit comfortably during the day, and it easily converts into a big double bed at night as well. Now, a few essentials we knew we needed were a toilet, a fridge and a sink. For cooking, we usually use a barbecue or a single burner portable gas stove, and I've also added a kettle and a toaster in this cabinet here, which has been really handy as well. Now, all of the cabinetry is made from moisture resistant melamine faced MDF. I basically use standard kitchen doors and side panels to make most of the cabinets out of. And I just screw them together using those little plastic corner blocks and battens once I cut everything. For the cutting, I used a jigsaw, a hand plane, an electric plane and a battery drill. So in here is where I keep my toilet, and it's a compact composting unit from Trebolo. I believe it's the Wonder Go Lite. And honestly, I've been really impressed with it so far. It fits perfectly into this space, and it dictated actually the height of all of these seats just here. Behind the toilet there is a large storage bin where we keep all of the bedding, and in the middle there's a big bin just here, and that is removable, and I'll explain why in just a second. But that is where we keep most of our clothing because it's quite easy to get into. Over on this side where I'm sitting is where I keep the fridge and some more storage as well just beyond that. The fridge is an Alpical C15 and it's a budget model, but so far so good, and I've been really impressed with it so far, so hopefully it lasts well. Now, one slight compromise with this layout is the seat that runs past the sliding door a bit. Now, I wasn't sure about this at first, but in practice it's been absolutely fine. And as for the removable middle box, it serves two purposes. First, if you need a bit of extra floor space, you can lift it out and remove it all together, but its main role is actually in the bed setup. Now, a lot of U-shaped camper van beds that I've seen tend to use a flap that folds out from this side and over to this side to create the bed for the middle. But the issue I found with that approach is that it lifts that cushion a little bit higher than the others, and it usually requires a supporting leg when this flap folds over against this kitchen cabinet. It also means that the seat needs to be a bit wider as well, because the flap that comes over has to fill this gap in the middle, which means that seat ends up being a little bit wider than you need, and you get less leg room in the middle as well. So instead I built this middle box here to slide down to the foot of the bed, and then I infill the remaining pieces with some custom made pieces of ply that I store neatly up here in this cupboard. I've got felt pads that are underneath and on the side of this main box, which helps it slide down the van as well, and also protects the side units as it slides down. Once all the pieces are in place, these cushions just fold down and create the bed space. So it's really quick to set up and it feels really solid as well, and I think it's a neat solution. Now, I've not seen anyone else do this exact setup before, so if you've seen something similar somewhere else, please do let me know, because I would love to take a look and see how they have done it as well. Maybe it's not my own design, maybe I've seen it somewhere else, I don't know, but it's what I've come up with and it's working really well at the minute. So the kitchen cabinet is where I keep most of the things that I need to get quick access to. It's just a lot easier to get into this than it is to get underneath these bench seats here. And I've got all the usual bits and pieces in here. We've got, you know, bottles, condiments, plates, cups, a kettle, lots of cleaning bits and bobs in there. And in this side here, we've got these little plastic storage boxes, which are quite handy for organising all your bits and bobs to a point. Up the top here, we've got some 240 AC power outlets and a couple of USB sockets, which is where I plug my kettle in. Usually the kettle sits up here, and I plug that in there, which is quite handy as well. Also plug the toaster in there. Below that, we've got my power station, which is the EcoFlow Delta 2 Max, which takes care of all of the power in the van. Now, if I'm careful with my usage, I can probably get about 5 days out of that power bank there. Maybe a bit longer if I boiled my water with, say, a stove as opposed to the kettle. Now, it's currently charging via the 12-volt outlet through to the alternator, you know, the cigarette lighter, and that puts in about 80 watts of power when I've got the engine running. But one, I guess, upgrade I'm considering is to perhaps get a DC to DC charger. I know EcoFlow do one, and I think it can put in between 500 and 800 watts straight from the alternator to the power station. and that would pretty much take care of all of my power. I don't think I'd ever need to top it up using the 240 mains from the house. So above all of that, we've got the sink with cold running water and a couple of shelves at the top here as well, just to put bits and bobs on, so it keeps the worktop space nice and free of stuff that accumulates. You know what it's like. So just behind the blanket there, I've got a table which is strapped to the driver's seat, and that's quite universal. It was very, very cheap, but I can set it up in here. So if I want to work in here, I can set it up, or I can use it outside as well. So that serves a couple of different purposes, which I think is always a good thing when you're, in such a small area. If you can have something that will do multiple things or multiple tasks, it's obviously saving your space, isn't it? So around this area, I've installed a dimmer switch for the LED lighting in the ceiling, and also a USB and USB-C socket as well. So as you can probably tell, apart from the battery that you can see in the cupboard down here, most of the other services are tucked away completely out of sight, which I think really helps keep things clean and uncluttered inside. So let's head around the outside and I'll show you the storage or garage space area. I honestly don't think this design would have been possible without the twin sliding doors, because I think they've just made such a big difference. So over here, I've got access to my fresh water and the grey water containers, the diesel heater and the rear access to the battery, which is where I can plug it into the mains for charging. There's also the fuse board tucked in here as well, plus enough storage for a couple of folding chairs and a bit of extra boot storage too. And what I really like is that I can access all of this from the outside of the van, and I think it just makes things easier when I'm setting up or packing down. I deliberately chose the passenger side sliding door for the service area because it's on the same side as the diesel tank fill-up point, so I can fill both the main tank and the diesel heater at the same time, which I think will be super handy. So I've still got some finishing touches to do in this area, but yeah, it's nearly done. And lastly, as I mentioned earlier, my daughter uses the cab area as her bedroom. So to make this work, we use just an inflatable mattress that kind of molds to the shape of the interior as we blow it up. And she's 5'4" and it fits her perfectly and gives her a nice cozy little setup. To give her some more privacy and obviously to block the light out, I made some window covers using recycled corrugated plastic sheeting. I think you use this in building work for protecting surfaces. And these just slot in easily to help create a surprisingly spacious and private room for her up front. Now, I've definitely learned a lot through this build, and it's the first proper conversion that I've actually done. So I think I've really enjoyed the process. Most of the time anyway. Now, one of the biggest lessons for me was making sure to buy all of the key accessories before I started the build. That way you can sort of tailor everything around them. And I did that for most of the things except the two chairs. I left those until later. I then spent ages trying to find two that would actually fit in the space that I'd already built. So yeah, lesson learned there. So I think that wraps up the tour. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you've got any questions at all, please feel free to leave a comment down below and I'll do my best to answer those. And if you'd like to follow along with my weekly videos as I get out and about and explore in the van, be sure to subscribe. Anyway, thanks again for watching. Take care and hopefully I'll see you next week.